of all the subjects on which you could improve your knowledge, I can't think of one more valuable than money. And let's be honest, most of us are starting from a pretty low base.
64,000 is the median number of words per book. Average person reads about 200 words per minute. Simple math will tell us that is one book in 320 minutes. To accomplish this in 7 days, numbers say you would have to read for 45 minutes a day. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that notification button, like, comment, and share. Enjoy.
Welcome to Season 9 of the Book of the Week series. My name is Igor. For years I've walked and I've listened. This series is a record of that discipline. Not just sharing books, sharing a method to cut through the noise. Today we listen to The Price of Money. How to Prosper in a Financial World That's Rigged Against You by Rob Dix. So, for the next few minutes, let this be an invitation. Invitation to slow down, to reduce the noise, to make a choice to listen. This is a book that introduces ideas one at a time in a logical sequence, not assuming that you know anything at all before you start. This book is full of utterly bizarre phenomena that had been right under your nose your whole life, yet no one bothered to explain them to you. Stick around till the end. This season, I'm not just sharing a tool. I'm sharing the foundational layer. I'll show you how to identify the single most important frequency in all the noise of your life. A unique, innate human need that is secretly driving your decisions, your behavior, and your sense of overwhelm or fulfillment. It is the first critical step on what I call the listener's path. But first, let's listen to the past. Let's listen to The Price of Money, How to Prosper in a Financial World That's Rigged Against You. Understanding money goes far beyond being able to pick the best savings account or decide on an appropriate mortgage. Those are helpful life skills, but they're just tiny, tiny details in the overall big picture. What's the point of picking the best savings account if the inflation means the money in every savings account will actually lose its value? Does it matter that you found a great mortgage if house prices are about to collapse? First of all, there's no getting away from the fact that it is a complex subject. There are countless interconnected concepts, and every time you look up something to grasp it better, the answer refers to 3 other things you do not understand. Secondly, it is perceived as a boring topic. It's boring. However, did you know that the British pound had lost 99% of its value over the last 100 years? How did that happen? Did you know that banks can never run out of money to lend because they're allowed to create it out of thin air? Thirdly, and cynically, there is no incentive for the people in power to help you become better informed. Because if you're left in the dark, it is easier to take advantage of you. And fourthly, it doesn't help that even highly trained economists cannot agree on most of the stuff between themselves. Because the world is so complex, and you can never just tweak one variable at a time. 5 economists can look at the same situation and generate 5 completely different explanations for why it happened and what should be done about it. You never really know if you understand something until you try to explain it to someone else. Process that for a second. So the coins, the money, in this scenario are performing 3 useful functions at the same time. They are generally accepted as a form of payment. known in economics lingo as the medium of exchange. Because the carrot buyer, the hairdresser, and you all agree to accept coin payments. Now it's easier for you to make trades between one another. If you didn't have coins or some other object to function as money, to sit in between every trade that you do want to make, you would be stuck with barter. And you would only get your haircut if you could find someone who's nifty with a pair of scissors and fancies carrot soup for lunch. So they're a way of keep track of how much something is worth, technically called unit of a value. So by stating of a price of everything in relation to coins, you can easily compare products, compare services against one another. Without this, you actually need to have a separate exchange rate for every possible combination. Carrots to haircuts, haircuts to chickens, and so on. And finally, the third, they are a store of value, which, unlike most terms in economics, it is exactly what it sounds like. So your carrots earned you 2 coins, but you only spent 1. By holding one of the other coins rather than spending it, you are effectively taking some of the reward of the value you created by growing those carrots and carrying it forward through time. So you could enjoy it by exchanging the coin for something you want in the future. So that's basically what money is. In principle, you could use absolutely anything as money, as long as enough people agree to exchange their goods and services for it. In practice, though, some forms of money work better than others. Gold has been used as a type of money for thousands of years. But why did it start to be used as money in the first place? Well, there are 6 characteristics. You can easily test the purity of a gold coin to make sure each unit is identical, which makes trade easier because then it doesn't matter which one you get. This property of being swap any unit for any other is known as fungibility. Now, second one, it's highly durable because it doesn't react with elements, whereas silver, for example, tarnishes when exposed to air. Gold effectively lasts forever without losing quality. Third, it's actually divisible. It can be melted down and then into different quantities, which means you can use it for transactions of all sizes. Fourth, it's actually portable. You can mold it into convenient shapes, like coins or gold bars. And according to relative scarcity of gold, you don't need the coins to be huge or tiny to represent a practical amount of day-to-day value. Fifth, it's recognizable because you can easily stamp gold with some kind of a symbol which shows it meets the official symbol. And finally, the 6th characteristic. It is scarce. There's only a certain amount of gold you can dig out of the ground, and the amount of that remains in the ground can progressively be more difficult to reach. So kudos to ancient humans then. Of all of the natural occurring elements, out of all of them, they picked the one that was naturally the best suited to function as money. See, all the factors, these 6 factors, are important, but scarcity is the absolute deal breaker. Without scarcity, none of these other factors count for anything. So money is, in other words, an entirely social phenomena. So if Jeff Bezos was to avoid a nuclear war by escaping to a bunker on his secret island lair, which I imagine he totally does have, and then emerge a year later as the only survivor, his billions of dollars would be of no value whatsoever, with no one to trade with. Money is useless. Imagine he then wandered the earth and came across a primitive Pacific tribe that had somehow survived. And they exchanged value by swapping the prettiest shells they could find. Jeff could show them wads of paper with pictures of Benjamin Franklin on them, but it wouldn't get him very far. Yet while money may be a made-up social construct, it is an extremely important one. The government only accepts payments of taxes in its own currency. Everyone has to pay taxes, and taxes can only be paid in a particular currency. Therefore, everyone now has a need for that currency. Now, this gives the government control over money, and control over money leads to control and power in general. Modern currencies don't have a fixed value. When the price of something is changed, it is important to consider the value of the currency changing as well as the item itself. When you look at the prices in gold rather than pounds or dollars, they actually either stay the same or declined rather than increased, which suggests something is happening to the currency rather than anything else. Our money is relatively stable in short term, but its buying power has dramatically and consistently decreased over 150 to 200 years and almost halved over the last 20 years alone. See, my favorite dictionary definition of inflation. You don't have a favorite definition? Is from the Random House Webster's unabridged dictionary. A persistent, substantial rise in the general level of prices related to an increase in the volume of money and resulting in the loss of value of currency. So, rise in general level of prices, increase in the volume of money, and loss of value in the currency, inflation. Funnily enough, money loses value for the same reason the prices of individual products change, supply and demand. To be more precise, the supply of money has increased over time, and as the quantity of money increases, the value of each unit falls. Inflation is measured by a basket of goods that is used to calculate an official measure of the inflation, but in reality, everyone has their own personal level of inflation depending on what they buy. Government does want inflation because they're scared of deflation because it makes it easier to manage their own debt. Long-term generalized inflation results from the amount of money in the economy increasing faster than the amount of goods and services you can buy with it. This actually means that modern currencies are not performing one of the three functions of money as a store of value. You may have been taught as a child that the golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. A more cynical golden rule was made famous in the movie Aladdin. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. And as you will see, a more accurate, if less pithy, formulation might actually be whoever has the power makes the rules about the gold. The Bank of England didn't have anything near enough of gold to prepare for the World War. Now, this predicament was made even worse by individuals who, spooked by the rumors of war being declared, began doing the one thing that the bank didn't want, queuing up to convert their banknotes into gold. As a result, the day after war was declared on Germany, the Currency and Banknotes Act of 1914 was signed into law. Now, this gave the government the power to print millions of pounds worth of new banknotes, which had to be accepted as legal tender and critically could not be converted into gold. Currency and Banknotes Act of 1914 marked the first time that the central bank issued money that had no link to gold at all. These new pounds were pounds purely because they had £1 printed on them and because the authorities said, this is what they're worth. The link with gold was briefly reinstated after World War I, but in 1931 the Bank of England permanently stopped offering to redeem banknotes for gold. From that day onward, the pound has been actually a fiat currency, meaning it has value purely because the government says so, and has no link to anything tangible whatsoever. The United States actually held 3/4 of the world's gold supply. How did it accumulate so much? Well, first in 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued an order banning American citizens from owning gold. All gold was to be sold and had to be sold to the government in exchange for paper dollars. This was intended to boost the central bank supply, and it did. Another factor was that before entering World War II, the United States supplied the Allies with weapons and with other resources for which they were paid for in gold. And because it entered the conflict later than other countries, the war effort drained its resources much less. So the United States post-war power, as well as its quantity of gold reserves and general trust in strength of the dollar, meant that the dollar was seen to be as good as gold. So in 1944, a new system was devised and signed up for by 44 countries. A new system had 3 defining characteristics. The dollar was given a fixed value in terms of gold, 10 ounces to $35. Every other currency fixed its exchange rate into a relation to the dollar. Countries, but not individuals, could hand their dollars back to the U.S. Central Bank, called the Federal Reserve, at any time and receive the equivalent amount of gold. Now, on August 15, 1971, President Nixon announced that the convertibility of the US dollar into gold is going to be temporarily suspended. In other words, on a temporary basis, $35 would stop equalizing 10 ounces of gold, or any amount of gold on a temporary basis. The US dollar would be backed by nothing, and therefore so would every currency with its exchange tied to the dollar be worth nothing. Now, this temporary basis has been going on for now 50 plus years. See, whenever the people in control of money have had the opportunity to devalue it for their own gain, they've tended to take it. The creation of the Bank of England made it possible for the state to borrow money in the United Kingdom's current national debt of over £2 trillion. Started with a single loan of £1.2 million. It was a loan, 1.2 million. See, the gold standard allowed countries to trade with one another easily by fixing their individual currencies to gold. Constraints on the money supply, like convertibility into gold, always gets abandoned during times of trouble, like war. Since 1971, all major currencies have had value purely because government says they do. And there's no practical constraint on them creating as much money as they want to. It sounds strange at first, but letting the commercial banks create money neatly avoids giving responsibility to a small number of individuals, and instead lets the market decide how much money is created. The role of the central bank is to influence the money creation of the commercial banks taking actions that cause banks to dial it up or dial it down, rather than getting directly involved into creating of money itself. Okay, great, but what kind of actions are we talking about? How do central banks collaborate with commercial banks to solve the money creation problem? Many people think of a bank as some kind of a matchmaking agency between savers and borrowers. But even if this had been the case way back in history, it is definitely not now. Today, a bank's ability to lend has very little to do with how much money savers have deposited. In fact, banks make loans whenever they want to, and new money is created in the process. Central banks oversee the creation of all money. However, they don't create much of the money themselves. Money is created when a loan is made by a commercial bank. And this is where most money in the economy comes from. Central banks influence the amount of money creation by setting the price of lending via the base rate. The cheaper it is to borrow, the more demand for borrowing there will be, and vice versa. See, life would be much easier for central banks if people responded robotically, borrowing more as it's cheaper, without taking anything else into consideration. Unfortunately, though, people have pesky emotions, like fear, like greed, which can cause and do cause considerable problems for central banks. See, even with interest rates held constant, people will be willing to do more borrowing or less borrowing, depending on how they feel about the future. The amount of private non-government debt in many economies has exploded from the end of the 70s onward, and although it peaked around 2010, in most countries, by historical standards, it's still extremely high. A big reason for this is that the cost of borrowing has fallen from the highs of the 1970s to almost nothing by the 2020s. See, because richer and poorer households borrow for different reasons and also at a different cost, a larger amount of debt in the economy creates even more inequality. In theory, lower interest rates lead to more borrowing. But psychology is a very important factor. People will overborrow when they're confident, even if it's expensive. And they will be reluctant to borrow at any price if they are fearful. Governments borrow to raise money for the many activities that they have to undertake, either because they cannot raise enough money through taxation or because they do not want to. But since the 1970s, most major governments have routinely spent more than what they've generated in tax revenue. This has been true for the United Kingdom in all but 6 years since 1975, and United States in every year but 4. This has resulted in many countries getting higher national debts than ever before, but the cost of paying interest on this debt has been relatively low by historical standards, because interest rates have been so super low. When the cost of government borrowing rises, those interest payments will be higher and the accumulated debt could become a serious problem. Now, a critical part of the QE, quantitative easing process, is that the central bank doesn't buy new bonds directly from the government. Instead, it buys them secondhand from institutions that already owned these bonds. So the basic process looks like this. The central bank creates some new money out of nothing. It uses this money to buy a government bond from a bank, from an insurance company, or from a pension fund that actually holds it. Now, this newly created money is in the hands of an institution that sold the bond, and the central bank now owns the bond. According to the Bank of England, QE, quantitative easing, was intended to generate consumer spending and therefore consumer price inflation via the four separate but related effects. Effect number one, increase spending by pushing up the prices of the bonds. Effect two, increase spending by pushing up the price of other assets, example, property or stock market. Effect three, increase the ability and willingness of banks to lend. And effect four, convince people that the Bank of England was still committed to its 2% inflation target. Now, no economic shock lasts forever. Eventually, the crisis passes and confidence does return. And when that does happen, it should be possible and it should be necessary to remove the stimulus that was put in place. According to both history and economic theory, here is what should have happened. To stave off the risk of recession and the crises in 2008, the central bank cuts interest rates and introduces quantitative easing. Confidence returns and the economy picks up. Quantitative easing ends and interest rates are gradually increased. Easy, super easy, except that did not happen at all. When the financial crisis hit around 2008, banks slashed interest rates to stave off recession, unemployment, and deflation. In the United States and the UK, this wasn't enough. So they also introduced quantitative easing, meaning basically creating money out of thin air, out of nothing. Owing to the mechanism that was used to get newly created money out into the economy, quantitative easing had a limited effect on consumer inflation. It did affect asset prices, which we'll come to later. So you would expect the economy to recover after a crisis, allowing interest rates to rise again. But that only partially happened. Central banks spent more money. They actually spent more than a decade struggling to prevent prices from falling, because policies had normalized. By the time the next crisis hit, it was actually limited room to maneuver, and central banks needed to take an even more and extreme action. So what's the view of the medium-term future? Interest rates that remain low by historical standards. Inflation higher than what we have been used to for the last 30 years. And critically, inflation that remains higher than interest rates. But now for the juicy bit, how can you arrange your financial life to capitalize on being in possession of this knowledge? Principle number one, forget about growing your wealth with savings. If you fail to acknowledge this unpleasant reality, you're doing yourself a financial harm. Many people are so worried about investing their money and then losing 50% of it in a market crash, then they would rather leave it in the bank, okay, where they will end up losing 50% of their buying power in 10 to 20-ish years, just because they thought they were putting it somewhere safe. So forget about that. Principle number two, do take on debt responsibly. Principle number three, be wary of fixed income investments. Principle number four, invest in real assets. And principle number five, invest in the stock market boringly. So what comes next? If the coming years play out as I anticipate, these approaches to making more out of your money should leave you in a strong position. But what about the strength of the financial system in general? My vision of the future looks a lot like even more of the same. More money creation, more debt, more pain for the savers, and more of a gap between who already own assets and those ones that do not. At some point, it all has to end. Okay? It all simply has to end at some point. When will that be? Maybe not too far away. Governments are motivated to create conditions of low interest rates and higher than average inflation to help them cope with their own debt. So it is reasonable to bet that this will continue. In this situation, savers are punished and borrowers are rewarded. So, taking on cheap debt to buy appreciating or cash flowing assets may be a good move, but it does involve risk. In an inflationary environment, fixed income investments can be expected to perform poorly. Some asset classes benefit from inflation, including commodities and property. Returns from all asset classes are likely to be lower over the next decade than they have been in the recent past. But it still beats just holding on to cash. So think real, not nominal. It is a strange illusion. Everyone readily accepts that today's money isn't like the yesterday's money. I bought my house in 1980s for £35,000 and that's more like £150,000 in today's money. Yet simultaneously, the same person fails to make any adjustment for tomorrow's money, being different from today's money, just like today's money is different than yesterday's money. This shows up in investing, where it's common for people to have a target in mind for how much they want to accumulate based on their living costs today, not realizing that some of that money will offer a lower standard of living in the future. The same amount of money will. It shows up in pay negotiations too, where most people are happy with their small annual pay rise, not realizing that depending on inflation, they might be worse off at the end of the next year. And of course, it shows up in government statistics. See, reporting the GDP has increased without pointing out that everything is just more expensive and in reality nothing extra has been produced. Understand that no one understands. The people in positions of power, they like to give out an impression of knowing. But let's be real. They're just people. Does anyone in your workplace really has a work plan that they calmly execute every day, or do they just do whatever seems to be like a good idea and then deal with each unexpected cock-up as it does happen? Would you entrust anyone you went to school with to look after your cat, let alone your economy? Policy makers, they might have degrees from fancy institutions on their CVs, but they're all just winging it, just like the rest of us. Understand your value. See, this book starts with an observation that you might have lost sight of, given how many layers we built on since then. Money is basically a fiction that everyone has chosen to believe in. Whether it is a clay disc, or a piece of metal stamped with a monarch's head, or just a number. The purpose of money is to represent value rather than to be valuable in itself. Now, if money is worth having, it is only because of the goods and services you can exchange for it later. Over time, everything about the way the financial system works will probably change. Today's currencies, they may be replaced and forgotten. We may move to a more local, decentralized system, or go all the way the other way and end up with a single currency, global currency. You never know. It's even possible that all the debt will actually get paid back. But the one thing that will never change is the desire of groups of people who trust each other to exchange goods and services between themselves so that everyone benefits one way or another. If you provide value, you will be rewarded. And if you want more money, You just need to demonstrate more value or reach more people with it. It's not easy, but it's at least within your control, whatever the world's governments and central banks happen to be getting up to. And there you have it, the price of money. How to prosper in a financial world that is rigged against you. Now, if this moment of focused listening brought you any value, any clarity, or simply peace, I ask you to do 3 things that cost you nothing, but actually help this signal reach others. Number 1, do like this video so that the algorithm shares it with other seekers. Number 2, share it with one person who needs to hear this message. And number 3, subscribe to stay in this channel of focused insight. The link to this book is in the description below, so you buy it and read and never stop learning, especially about yourself, because the greatest history, the greatest seeker's destiny is your own. Your first step on the path, gift yourself 10 minutes of self-listening. Take the free, definitive human needs test on my website, and it will reveal the core need driving your life's narrative. That revelation is your first layer. Find that link below. And when you are ready to move from understanding to artistry, to master the skill of self-awareness and self-management, social awareness and relationship management, that turn insight into impact, you will explore my Master of Life Awareness program. That is the journey, and it begins with listening. Thank you. Love and respect.